the third day of July. It's 2023. 2023. And we're back at it again tonight. The nuclear industry can't take a break, so we can't either, I guess. So Norway and Iceland are removing their restrictions. So you got Sweden, Iceland, Norway, and the EU. Should they have a referendum before removing the Fukushima deadly radioactive nuclear food ban? I think that's pretty appropriate. If you're being honest, right? We'll turn that volume back for a second. So I just spent quite a bit of time trying to tweak the volume to get some more treble, etc., etc. And I don't know how it came out. I'll have to hear it on your end. Here we go. We got the drive shaft showed up today. And I got a video of that for later on in the show. So last night, Calm Down Charlie, who's been stalking me for 10 years and works for TEPCO apparently, was threatening me. Really, the theory was I could shoot the video. I could shoot the video. I think that's Calm Down Charlie. Should we give it a try? Hello.
Hello, Mr. Dino.
Who's this?
Kishida Machado, Tokyo Bureau. How are you?
Is this the Tokyo Bureau Chicago division?
Indeed, yes. Mr. Dino,
how do you like my how do you like my T-shirt I got for you? Do you like my T-shirt?
Friend of Tokyo Bureau.
Do you like that?
Tell you about friend of Tokyo Bureau.
You fuck Tokyo Bureau. Fuck you too, you piece of shit.
Radiation.
You shut your pie hole.
He know a lot more than you.
Who do?
You're stupid, man. He a friend of Tokyo Bureau, and he is instrumental in helping us launch Operation Long Jump.
How do you spell that?
Operation Long Jump.
How do you spell it? How do you spell it? How do you spell it? How do you spell that? Long jump. Long jump? You say long jump?
Long jump.
Long jump.
No. Operation Long Jump. Get it right, Mr. Dino.
Long jump?
Long jump.
Did you order one of my T-shirts I made for you? You probably got the pink. You probably got the pink one, right?
Stop avoiding the situation.
What do you want, scumbag?
With Tokyo Bureau advisor and friend,
yeah,
Mr. Thunderfoot, you're gonna be finished. You're gonna be finished, Mr. Dino.
You're gonna be finished. Let me try it. I accidentally clicked it. You probably got the pink. You probably got the pink one, right?
Stop avoiding the situation.
What do you want, scumbag?
With Tokyo Bureau advisor and friend,
yeah,
Mr. Thunderfoot, you're gonna be finished. You're gonna be finished, Mr. Dino.
So one of these guys is the guy he's talking about. One of them is the shoe bomber. Or the diaper bomber, I can't remember. I'm not sure which one is which, but blastard. Anyway, I'm going to be really, really sorry, he says. So that's the guy he's got coming after me, apparently. You got any idea what kind of beating I'm going to give him? I can't wait. Bring it on. Yeah, I'm all shook up, eh? I'm so scared of you.
Yeah, should be. Oh, I would love to be in your shoes. Oh, you make me sick.
Hey, what are you going to be when you grow up?
Okay, sit tight, Mr. Dana.
What are you going to be when you grows up?
Sit tight. We'll be with you soon.
I heard.
See you later, Mr. Dana.
What are you going to be when you grow up? I heard you're going to be a big prick just like me. Which means you haven't got far to go, actually, do you? So there's an interesting threat. They're going to come out and challenge me, are they? That should be fun. And they being the turds right there. So we beat him, obviously. Now he's gonna bring. They hired the Friendship of Festivals. Is it? That who he talks about all the time. So they're gonna pay the shoe bomber or the other guy to harass me. So that's awesome. Hey, even bad publicity is good publicity, right? EU, Norway, and Iceland lift post-Fukushima curbs on Japanese food. Post-Fukushima curbs. I know this might sound a little ridiculous. Danny, you're nitpicking, but here's the problem with what Norway and Iceland, EU, and Sweden just done. You don't have to be very smart to understand how bad nuclear is. So there's 105,000 sites just in Fukushima Prefecture. And, I mean, you know, they picked up 30 million one-ton bags. And so they're growing food in the nuclear wasteland itself. And so this is really interesting how you had EU, then Switzerland, then Iceland and Norway on the same day announcing they're removing restrictions. And they basically didn't really have restrictions. They were the scumbag nuclear industry had to check it in Japan first before they can ship it, and had to give them a certificate so that they didn't have to do it. Like, there's no excuse for importing food from a nuclear wasteland for any country. The European Union, Norway, Iceland on Thursday lifted import restrictions they imposed on food products from parts of Japan after the nuclear disaster, which is 12 years ago. As a result of the changes, the number of countries and regions maintaining import controls due to radioactivity safety concerns is down to 9 countries from 55 economies that had restrictions in place at one stage. At one time, is more like it. The removal of requirements for Japan to test for radionuclides and provide safety certificates. So they weren't even checking it themselves. Just like the International Atomic Energy Agency, they're not doing samples themselves. For some seafood agricultural products is welcome news for producers in the nuclear wasteland, as like Fukushima, as well as 9 other affected prefectures. So we haven't got some of these added to the list, by the way. So you got Miyagi, we got in there. Yamagata's prefecture's not in there. Ibaraki is. Guma is. Niigata is. Yamanasaki isn't. And Shizuoka is not in there. Nagano and Iwate is in there. So we got to add them to the new map of where food is banned worldwide by 55 countries. So let me show you on the map where those prefectures are basically too. Got smaller. So we got to add in a prefecture right there behind my head, another one right here, and another one right there. And this is, in Tokyo's right here. So now you're talking about adding in these prefectures here, with these prefectures of where the food was banned by 55 countries worldwide. That is a staggering revelation, isn't it? Dirty, dirty, dirty nuclear. It is welcome news for the blah, blah, blah. The removal will send a symbolic message. A symbolic message. You're going to poison all the people in Norway and Iceland and Switzerland and the EU, and you're going to call that a symbolic message to the countries that have been restricting imports because it's a nuclear wasteland since the 2011 triple meltdowns. It was 4 meltdowns. So they refused to acknowledge reactor 4 melted down. They refused to acknowledge that the reactor 4 looks like this. It's not denial, it's a cover-up. And it's a deadly one. And let me show you the picture of it, what it looked like originally, right away. So reactor 4 is over there. There's nothing left of it, and even less of the stump at reactor 3. 27-nation European bloc announced its decision to end the measures based on scientific you're supposed to believe that no radioactive water has been dumped in the ocean. Super Seamster sewing show. The official story is nothing got out of these buildings. Only 2.2 grams, and all of it's in the 1,000 tanks. That's the new story as of 4 weeks ago. And so I've been advocating for 12 years that the buildings are gone. We lost the entire inventory into the environment, right? The ocean is completely contaminated. Bear with me. The ocean is completely contaminated. I've done the research expeditions. From Vancouver, British Columbia to Alaska, for instance, for 6 years. We're currently doing the Atlantic Ocean. And I towed that boat to Alaska. And many, many other places, of course. And here's what we discovered on the massive research expeditions was that the species to your left were wiped out. They never recovered. So the species you're looking at right there is your tip. Now, what happened was you had massive radioactive fallout. This was the Neptunium. That's the plutonium dispersal models. That's the buildings that are actually destroyed. But they came out and pretended the buildings weren't destroyed, all the world's media. So you're talking about it's a schizophrenic type conversation. The French put out models of 1 million to 10 million times weapons fallout of cesium-137. That's a significant plume model. So we launched emergency research expeditions to do the species counts because we know they're the first ones affected. It washes down the mountains to the tide zone. From everything on the west side of the Rocky Mountains washes back down. If it don't get hung up somewhere else, washes back down. What happened to Patrick Henry? I don't know. He was really good. He hadn't been around for a very long time. I think something happened. He just retired or something. Gave it up. These are the species to your left. They were exterminated. This is from the research expeditions. Due to the radioactive fallout covered the planet in about 20 to 30 days. And so the species to your left are exterminated. We know because we went back year after year and the species didn't recover. They never came back. They're completely wiped out. We're talking around roughly 7,000 species. And we done the whole coast, year after year after year after year, from Vancouver, British Columbia to Alaska. And these were very difficult expeditions. You're talking about the wild west coast. Just getting to your spots was nightmare. And now they're shipping food at the nuclear wasteland. Remember, in 2012, they had 865,000 extra cancers. It's been hemorrhaging into the environment non-stop, unmitigated for 12 years. And now the new official story as of a month ago was nothing got out. And they're going to roll out some creepy nuclear experts. We deal with them all day, every day. They're going to run out. They're going to run out the shoe bomber's twin brother, and he's going to beat me up apparently. So I'm so scared. The EU's decisions comes after International Atomic Energy Agency concluded in July that Japan's plan to release the treated. The United States, Israel, Singapore lifted their post-Fukushima imports in 2021, and Britain and Indonesia lifted theirs in 2022. South Korea's are shown signs of easing rhetoric. Seoul last month, well, they got 87% of the country protesting the tritium. They've done too good of a job with the fake story. Says his own analyst has found that the concentrations of radioactive material in the water meets the international standards. But again, the International Atomic Energy Agency is not a regulatory agency. They don't have sovereignty or authority over any country. And at the end of all the propaganda, he said, in times of both misinformation, quality journalism is more crucial than ever. They just lied about every facet of the story. And to have the arrogance to put that there, my son. Japanese cuisine ingredients were shown at an exhibition in China. The media looks for anything as a wedge, as a leverage. Japanese affiliated food companies presented a range of the Japanese radioactive ingredients at exhibitions in China's coastal province of Shandong to promote their taste and safety. And we hear that a lot over the last dozen years. Taste is the best taste and is safe. And these people can barely spell their own names, the majority of them that are saying it. The event was held in the city of Jinan on Thursday. It comes amid strong opposition by the Chinese government to Japan's plan to release the treated and diluted water from the massive disease factory known as Fukushima. Like, they haven't stopped hemorrhaging it into the environment. Right? They haven't stopped hemorrhaging radiation into the environment this whole time. And so we've got a really super important poll. Should Sweden, Iceland, Norway, and the EU have a referendum before removing the deadly Fukushima radioactive nuclear food ban like Taiwan done? And at least have a conversation. But Taiwan's referendum was only good for 2 years. And so then they didn't have another referendum. They just removed the restrictions. And the media didn't even report on it. The Japanese came out and gloated about it like they're doing right now with Norway and Iceland. But Norway and Iceland is not reporting on it. The EU is not reporting on what they're doing. And Sweden is not reporting that they're removing the restrictions on the nuclear wasteland. And the reality of it was the restrictions weren't restrictions. They had the scumbags in Japan checking the food and sending it over with a certificate, so they don't have to check it. So you lost your planet basically now. The opposition is also affecting other Japanese food products. It's all contaminated, the whole country, and North America included. And the planet was incredibly, got a massive pulse, and this never goes away. It's there for millions of years. Rain and groundwater mixed with water used to cool the molten fuel at the Fukushima Daiichi plant. Accumulated water is treated, and they're so anal about their propaganda. Treated. Treated. Get your treated. They just needs a pop singer to come out and sing a song about the treated, yummy, safe, radioactive food. Opponents in Japan, South Korea urge to suspend the Fukushima radioactive wastewater discharge. Now they're talking about what might happen instead of what has happened for 12 years non-stop. Despite wide criticism from both home and abroad, the Japanese government has been pushing for the discharge of the radioactive wastewater this summer. In other words, they're saying they've never released any. Nothing has gotten out officially. But how do you keep it in when the buildings don't even exist anymore? You're talking about each building had around 10 million pounds, had decades and decades of reactor cores stored in the 2 fuel pools at the top of each building, because you don't have a repository anywhere on the planet, let alone Japan. Kishida Mashada is gonna get the old creepy YouTuber to come after me. There's no way you can win that debate, see? I'm gonna eat that guy for breakfast. He's been attacking me for years. Now they're gonna hire him to attack me again. Big whoop. Despite wide criticism both home and abroad, the Japanese government has been pushing for discharge of radioactive wastewater this summer from Fukushima. An environmentalist in Japan's Fukushima prefecture voiced his opposition to Japan's plan. An environmentalist. Hey, how come you don't mention me, media? Well, they do when they're demonizing me. So once the ocean is the only good sentence out of it all was, once the ocean is contaminated, it'll be impossible to clean it up. Japanese eateries in China fear ruin as Fukushima water discharge loom. So they created Japan, China, Taiwan, and South Korea are working together, the governments and the universities and the medias, to cause this large controversy over tritium that might be released into the ocean. And they've dominated. No other narratives are allowed to exist. And so you won't see any of the stories where they're going to show those pictures, because then their story doesn't work, right? So it's important somebody shows the pictures of the actual building so people can, because people don't know what the fuck is going on. They're talking about something, they don't even know what it looks like, and they're calling it tritium instead of nuclear meltdowns. China's the biggest importer of the Japanese seafood. South Korea imported 1.5 billion pounds over the last 12 years that we know about, of just seafood, folks. We're not talking about everything else. Damaged the Fukushima plant. It banned the import of food and agricultural products from 5 Japanese prefectures. And then later widened this ban to cover 10 out of Japan's total of 47. There's no legitimate reason not to ban all 47 prefectures in Japan. The food should be banned, and all products, pencils, cars, everything, winches, anything from Japan should be banned immediately. They've are completely out of control. Their intent is to poison everything and everybody. The latest import restrictions were imposed this month after United Nations a watchdog, which is not a watchdog, doesn't have any authority, is not a regulatory agency, approved Japan's plan to discharge the treated water. And so the minute you see the word treated and they're going to discharge it, then you're not dealing with a real conversation, you're dealing with total propaganda. And we know that because you can't treat something that doesn't exist anymore, for starters. And the buildings are actually gone. Now, they claimed they were in both of those buildings, the fuel pools were perfect, and they got the inventories out. And so the most important question is why would the world's media and universities, because they had to all participate in that lie for that to work. It can't work with any dissenting voices. Hence the reason I got 14 million people on my show tonight. 14 people on my show tonight. Because the truth is a crime. And when you see more likes than votes, then you know that that's been censored, right? Because we got 500 polls here. We kind of know a thing or two, right? Let me play this short clip of them pretending they're in the building. And you got to ask yourself, why would the world's media pretend they're in a building that don't exist? This is just 4 of them. The whole world done this.
Where I'm standing is on top of what used to be reactor building number 4. The whole of this building was blown apart by a huge explosion.
We are here inside Reactor 4 at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant that was severely crippled during the earthquake and tsunami of 2011.
Of the decommissioning work taking place here in Reactor 4.
At the end of our tour, we were checked for radiation exposure. In 4 hours, I received the equivalent of less than a chest x-ray.
1,500 highly radioactive fuel rods inside this pool. They've got to move them outside of this reactor.
So what we got to do is when their nuclear expert attacks me, they got a Facebook, they got a Twitter, and they got an Instagram and a YouTube, is everybody create Twitter, Facebook, Instagram accounts and spam this little clip. Just everybody hit him. He can't block everybody. And then hopefully we can gotta wait till the story goes viral and everybody's attacking me. And then everybody spam them with this one. And put a link to Calm Down Charlie's t-shirts if you do it so that I can make a few bucks to attack the industry. Just kidding, folks. China is the biggest importer of the nuclear wasteland, which is simply not true, by the way. Okay, we've done that. Kishida to bring up water release misinformation at three-way summit. So he calls that is considered misinformation if you believe the picture over there. If you believe these people, then that's the information they want to, because you can't have this blow up on them. And so they're going to use artificial intelligence to try to catch as many as they can and then block those IP addresses probably permanently, right? So use an IP blocker if you're going to be doing it. Damage to Fukushima plant to ban the imports of food and agricultural products. I've already done that, Dana. Kishida to bring up misinformation is seen confirming with U.S. and South Korea leaders at the upcoming meeting their cooperation on dealing with misinformation regarding the release into the sea of the treated water from Fukushima No. 1 nuclear power plant. Kishida is also expected to use his meetings with the U.S. President Joe Biden to accelerate discussions within Japan's ruling camp on easing export rules on defense equipment. Right? You know bloody well the military-industrial... UN is the military-industrial complex, right? And so selling weapons is how to get their kickbacks, basically. The Prime Minister is set to meet Biden, South Korea President, Camp David presidential retreat near Washington on August 18. The three-way summit talks are expected to focus on measures against North Korea's nuclear missile development and security cooperation. Oh, and most importantly, the misinformation on the water. So there's, because South Korea and China, on purpose, have been incited to protest against the upcoming release instead of the 12 years of constant release. And then because there's no dissenting voices out there to correct it, the industry is focused in on me and you. China measures run counter to the tenets of free trade. Now we've heard this argument, this terrible, useless argument many times before over the last 4 weeks. China has continued to tighten import restrictions of marine products from Japan. This is an unreasonable measure lacking scientific basis. Then it says crazy, like the crazies do. The Japanese government must strongly urge Beijing to withdraw the restrictions. Think about the arrogance. Now, they done that to South Korea. They took them to the World Trade Organization, which is, UN, and they won. And they, South Korea, you got to import the food from the nuclear wasteland. You're part of the World Trade Organization. You got to take that food. And they took them to the appeals board and won, but it took a whole year or something. Suspending food imports from 10 prefectures, including Fukushima. Really, you're going to include Fukushima? That's pretty nice of you. Since the inspection takes at least about 2 weeks to complete, refrigerated marine products, radioactive marine products, do not last long, will effectively no longer be allowed to be exported from Japan. In one case, a Japanese exporter reportedly had to discharge all perishable products like tuna, resulting in a loss of more than 100 million yen. A proper thing, trying to poison all the Japanese or Chinese. China opposes Japan's plan. So this is how they create the controversy, right? So they need to get people upset too, get them emotionally attached to the argument. And then the worldwide, they'll start protesting everywhere in the streets. And when the world reaches a fever pitch, Japan will come out and say, you know what? We hear you, and we're not going to dump it in the ocean. We're not going to pollute the Pacific Ocean. And the whole world celebrates, woo, we almost lost the Pacific. Then they all go back to sleep. And Japan, we just hoodwinked them. 12 years of straight dumping. What a bunch of morons. Well, they got all the media, all the universities, and all the key positions in government to back them up worldwide. No exceptions. It's and that's frightening. That can only be due, like, the only one that can pull that off is UN. Which, guess who's behind it all? Who's the military-industrial complex? 195 militaries. It is clearly unreasonable to tighten regulations even before the discharge. So again, they're claiming there's no discharges. So what they do, like when you hear someone arguing about tritium, and they're nuclear experts, they write all kinds of articles, they do videos, and you really like them. Well, they're lying to you. Wake up, grow up, admit that they're lying. Because why wouldn't you acknowledge the buildings are completely gone? It's been hemorrhaging for 12 years. So how can anybody with even a grade 3 education talk about tritium? How does that work? Well, that's the cover story, and it comes from all corners. The Jap government needs to make a broad appeal to the international community with the lack of scientific basis for China's regulations. As for the discharge of the treated water into the ocean, the International Atomic Energy Agency has compiled a report stating it would have negligible radiological impact to people and the environment. With regard to China's unilateral measures, Chief Cabinet Secretary Nasty pointed out that should blanket radiation inspections be introduced, this would run counter to the international trend of poisoning everybody in your countries. Beijing's attitude of turning a deaf ear to the Japan's government on scientifically based explanations and unnecessary inflaming anxiety. And it appears that's what they're up to. They're trying to create a controversy and get the whole world talking about Fukushima tritium. So then they can put that to rest by saying, oh, well, we're not going to release it into the ocean. Otherwise, they would have already started, see? Right? They would have just powered ahead with it. Just hang on. Because unfortunately, it's important that I explain United Nations. Because everybody's saying, well, United Nations said. And because if you insult the United Nations, then you're not being scientific, is what they're trying to say. Okay, so the official story is nothing got out of the destroyed buildings, only 2.2 grams. That's been going on for about 4 weeks. Any fish that got out were in the compound right here, and there's nets there, and they must have escaped, and that's why they got the fish. They caught radioactive fish locally, or even far away. It's because they escaped the compound. That's the new official story. We've never heard this one before. So Japan's nuclear wastewater discharge plan provokes worldwide. So the International Atomic Energy Agency's role is to analyze and confirm data provided by the criminals, not directly collect independent samples and verifying them themselves. And when it comes, that's for the water. And when it comes to the bags, the 105,000 sites in the prefectures. So this year's story, IAEA says the public trust the key to projects using radioactive soil from the nuclear wasteland of Fukushima Prefecture. There's 30 million one-ton bags, and they're cutting it open, growing food. And they said the solution to the trust, the IAEA is not a regulator, is not in a position to judge or approve Japan's soil. But what the media is telling you today is that it's okay because they said it was safe. Right? So that's such an important facet to this story, because they're trying to say that IAEA is the rule of law, but in the reality of it is they're the orchestrators. They're just a pro-nuclear public relation firm for UN, which is a military. UN is a huge military, and it has 195 militaries. And if you don't think they're a military, then look at what they've done to North Korea for 70 years now. That's the police action still ongoing for 70 years with United Nations, right? Opponents in Japan, South Korea urged to suspend Fukushima radioactive waste discharge. This was a 400-year-old wreck, 25 meters in length, 6 meters in width. It was almost perfectly preserved. They think it caught fire, and that's why it sank. It's extraordinary to find that old of a ship in perfect shape. Japan's TEPCO back to profit in the first quarter on lower fuel costs. Fukushima water release in focus. Last month, Japan's nuclear regulator, which was created after the meltdowns, I might add, granted approval for TEPCO, which is a corporation, and nobody can be held accountable because they're on the stock exchange. And so there's no incentive not to be evil. It granted approval for TEPCO to start releasing the water from the plant, which they've been releasing unhinged, non-stop, for 12 straight years. I mean, so like, you're trying to have a conversation, but everybody's a liar. And why don't they show you these pictures and say the same sentences? Japan's fishermen are concerned about the nuclear wastewater discharge. And the picture they're showing you, they call that Fukushima plant. That's actually an oil site. And what you see in burning up there, that intense burning, see that little fire up there? You got all, you know what that is? That's 1,800 pounds of uranium, what they said claim is depleted uranium, 1,800 pounds, stored at that site. And it's burning. That's, you're talking about oh shit amount of radiation released into the environment. This is actually Fukushima. Local citizens of Fukushima City, which they should be there because Fukushima City is a massive nuclear wasteland. Like, Fukushima City is ridiculous. Every house, and there's 370,000 people there, and every house qualifies for decontamination from radiation. Poor Kishida Machado must be so disappointed that his big brother, who's gonna defend him and beat me up, is just your everyday scumbag like him. Billion times normal fallout in Tokyo. There is no normal level. Very high concentration recorded all monitoring posts in the northern hemisphere. The sea line is emaciated. That's in the Galapagos Island. But that's clearly emaciated. They're not even supposed to be in the Galapagos Island, by the way. Fukushima may be eating holes in people's brains. The report, the military is brought in to hide the true radiation. Officials are covering up dire consequences of the crisis. Worry over high numbers of cancers being detected was 865,000 in the first year. And the Japanese were always running headlines like this, and for EU and China and stuff like that. Astronomical amount of radiation found in downtown Tokyo, directly outside of government buildings. Horrifying readings where children are playing. No, Dana, there's 2.2 grams, and it's all locked up in that 1,000 fuel pools, Dana. Hundreds of millions of salmon missing. Fish starving to death. It's bad enough the whales and seals and sea lions are starving to death, and the birds, even the fish are starving to death. All forms of ocean life dying in stunning numbers across the Pacific. That's 2017. I was actually out on the research expeditions in March 2017. And I was reporting into this site regularly when I had internet. Dead animals litter California beaches. Alarming phenomenon. Graveyard of washed up sea life. Influxes of emaciated sea creatures. The animals are starving to death, covered in sores, stunted growths, weak immune systems. Massive die-off of sea creatures from California to Alaska, 2017. Animals are starving as the food chain continues to collapse. Mass starvation event plagues the West Coast. Scientists felt like I was doing nothing but counting dead animals. Massive die-offs reported in the Pacific Ocean. There's no fish out there anywhere. What's happening? Where's their food? Total failure in reproduction, like nothing ever observed before. 100% death rates of baby seals on the California coast. None survived. Starving, suffering from shortages of food in the Pacific Ocean. Extremely emaciated. The milkless moms are immediately abandoning the pups. LA Times, ongoing fish famine along the U.S. West Coast. The dearth of food across the ocean. Severe fishery implosion. It's hard to watch. Scientists, the West Coast bird die-off is the biggest ever recorded. There was 1.4 million common murres and a million cassini auklets. And the common murres, they dive 600 feet all day and feed on anchovies and squid and sardine, herring and capelin, small fish, 8, 9, 10 inches maybe. But cassini auklets are skimmers. They feed on the zooplankton, the phytoplankton, the microscopic animals. So to have mass starvation of those species at two different spectrums of the food chain, what more do you actually need to know? Staggering, alarming, unheard of, never seen anything like it, unprecedented in size, scope, duration. Hundreds of thousands, a host of other freakish phenomenons. Yeah, it was 1.4 million murres, but it was other species too. There was 1.4 million murres, and the reason I bring them to the highlight is because they dive a seagull can't dive 600 feet, but they can. And so if they show up starved to death, there's a failure. And if the cassini auklets show up starved to death, then that's the gain. That's two different spectrums of food chain. And because there was nothing on the coastline, as I showed you those pictures earlier, they were stripped, and we went back year after year, the species didn't recover or even show back up. And then you see the arrogance of the so-called authorities. I brought deformed vegetables for radiation measurements, but officials didn't test any and yelled, "Don't you understand? We say it's safe." All the beetles were disfigured and died. India, nuclear nightmare. Children with mutations on almost every street. Deformed head, lopsided bodies, toad skin, eyelids turned inside out. Schools built using radioactive waste, part of community outreach projects. So it's an extermination machine, right? No one should be living anywhere near there. How India's nuclear industry created a river of death. Radiation fear is growing as government funds strangely deformed trees around Fukushima. 100% have logical defects. Trees do not have a top bud, without it, which it grows cannot continue. Effects worsening over time. Research is prevented from doing studies, and there's so little data. Mutations increasing in Fukushima. Strange things are happening to the plants and animals. Long list of mutated life forms. We've done entire presentations on the mutations, by the way. Officials are back from Fukushima. Invisible blanket of death covers everything. No, Dana. Nothing got out. It was only 2.2 grams. There's only tritium, Dana. Stop your fear-mongering. Kishida right now. Mom, come downstairs. Dana's talking about Fukushima again. I'm going to get Elephant Foot to come after him. Officials back from Fukushima. Invisible blanket of death covers everything. It's a nightmare. Parents suspect heart defects related to Fukushima. Former World Health Organization experts blast UN Fukushima report. Warrants of cancer spike. Genetic passports for major populations exposed to nuclear radiation deforms their genes. Twins attached by organs growing outside their bodies, one-eyed cyclops, babies with gigantic heads. They respond to people around them. It's clear that low-level contamination is more dangerous than a single dose. Grasshoppers with deformed wings, gray eyes, not red, birds with abnormal sperm, strange large tumors. Report there's no sparrows, says bird watchers Nagaya. Downtown area was void of any form of birds. Well, that migrated over here pretty quick. Two-headed salmon born out of 50 eggs, usually 1 in 10,000 at best. Veterinarian rate of deformed babies in Tokyo area will skyrocket from Fukushima disaster. People who were there should not marry at all costs. All these fearmongers, isn't that something? But I'm the fearmonger, not all these people. What kind of world is this? Radiation experts, alarming number of children with tumors on the thyroids. Access to Japan's birth statistics requested, not granted. It dove straight since Fukushima. The birth rates have dove straight. It was 865,000 cancers in the first year. And for neonates and infants, it's 14.2% per 100,000 live births need open heart surgery. Like, these are absurd numbers we're talking about. These are, and when you're talking about 865,000 extra cancers in the first year, that's just one of 1,800 diseases. Not everybody was diagnosed, for goodness sakes. Not everybody became ill in the first year. Not everybody got health care. The list goes on and on. Not everybody got access to doctors, etc., etc. Fukushima plume model shows 1 million becquerels over the west coast. This was the Xenon-133, burns a hole through your lung and sequesters in your bones of the children and the insects and birds, mammals and animals. Everyone on Earth has been irradiated by Fukushima. Shocking new study reveals true extent to the global impact. The scientists are only just now confirming far-reaching effects of the nuclear disaster. Mic check, 1, 2. Test that out again. Checkmate, 1, 2. That's a bit better, I think. Let's try that for a little bit. Might have to turn one of these down a notch just to make up for it. Oh, I'll turn that back up. Stephen Young says, I wonder what happened in 2011. You funny, man. And John says somebody ate a banana. Oh my God. That's just wrong, man, to use the banana. And it's funny, though. You got to give him credit. I don't know, Stephen, what happened in 2011. That's a great question, by the way. I'm glad you asked it. U.S. states hit with extremely large peaks of Fukushima radioactive material, significant amount of plutonium released for months. Radioactivity from the plant was measured globally and blanketed it the entire northern hemisphere. Liar! I can see Kishida Machado right now from the Tokyo Bureau of Chicago freaking out, calling out to his mom, Data won't stop lying about Fukushima. I'm going to get Elephant Foot to beat him up. I can't wait because I'm going to take his video and put all the information in it as he's lying to counter him and then repost the whole fucking video. And because there's a lot of people hates his guts, eh? Elephant Foot. Okay, let's do this. There we go. That should work. Let's do the enhanced version, actually, where I put flags of each country. I'm going to show you studies from different countries worldwide after Fukushima, acknowledging, now they downplay it, but they're acknowledging the radioactive fallout. So the fact that they had to come out and defend it, it tells you how bad it actually was. Modeling of marine radionuclides dispersions International Atomic Energy Agency program. Lessons learned from the Baltic Sea and Fukushima. Tracking the complete revolution of surface westerlies across the northern hemisphere using radionuclides from Fukushima. Global and local cancer risk. Global cancer risk after Fukushima nuclear power plant accident is seen from Chernobyl. Indications of the radioactive fallout in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia after Fukushima. Airborne fission products in high Arctic after Fukushima. Behavior of radiocesium during incineration of radioactivity contaminated waste from the decontamination activities in Fukushima. So this is the strangest study you're ever going to hear. So they decontaminated and then they burned it, incinerated, and contaminated everything again. You can't destroy the radiation, see? Like, there's no limit to evil with these people, was one thing we noticed. Arrival of the radionuclides released by Fukushima accident in the Canary Islands. Decontamination of radioactivity from contaminated vegetables derived from the Fukushima You can't decontaminate vegetables with radioactive fallout, folks. For God's sakes, don't ever, in any circumstances, let them talk you into doing something like that. So this study really bothered me. Reducing radioactive exposures using commonly available objects. So rather than tell people to evacuate the nuclear wasteland, they talked about using wooden boards and magazines, like 20 meter thick, to useful to reduce the radiation dose where you're sitting. So sit on cardboard and magazines and wooden boards so you wouldn't get too big of an anal radiation dose. I thought I had the other mug. I would have wasted it everywhere. The upper count of the measurement, count rating of 22,000 counts per minute. So radiation dose is decreased by approximately 50% when the thickness of the magazines, 2 layers of foam boards, 2 layers of wood boards. In addition, even though several types of clothes with 4 layers were used as shielding objects, their efficiency to shield the radiation doses were below 10%. What does that say about the paper suits they're using there, I wonder? The polyurethane clothes had less shielding efficiency than other cloth materials. Well, they should have wore paper suits. Then everybody would have been fine, right? Because that's how crazy this industry actually is. They use paper suits for the homeless and destitute victims of society. So rather than tell people to move out of the nuclear wasteland, they suggested that they use the thickness and everything else, 4 pieces of cardboard, 8 double layers, and 25 millimeter or something of magazine, foam boards. And then the author declared they have no conflict of interest. When you don't tell people they really should evacuate, that's a conflict of interest. When you're saying, get your magazines before you sit down, and so you don't get anal radioactive. Yeah, like observation of Fukushima fallout in Great Britain. Xenon-133 in the upper troposphere above Germany from Fukushima. Radioactive contamination monitoring for the Korean public. What a scum thing they done over in South Korea. Dry disposition velocity of cesium 137, 134 in Spain from the Fukushima nuclear meltdown. Artificial radionuclides in Russia as a result of the accident of Fukushima nuclear power plant. Indicators of the Fukushima radioactive releases northwest Romania. Detections of radio xenon in Darwin, Australia, following the Fukushima nuclear power plant. It's everywhere worldwide. Airborne iodines and cesium due to Fukushima in Italy. See, they had to acknowledge it, and that's how they, and then play it down, right? 134, 137 cesium, 131 iodine in France. You can't have any of it without uranium, plutonium, and americium, and neptunium, and strontium, and 1,000 fission products. You got one, you got 1,000 other. Atmospheric radionuclides from Fukushima Daiichi nuclear reactor accident observed in Vietnam. Radioactive fallout in British Columbia was covered up. Radionuclides in Lithuania aerosol. Radioactivity inspections of Taiwan for food products imported from Japan after the Fukushima accident. Detection of Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant radioactive traces in Monaco. In Beijing, China. In Greece, Athens. Liberia Peninsula. 137, 134, 1 iodine, 7 barium, maximum activities at high altitude of European locations, and long-range transport of 131 iodine radionuclides from Fukushima accident to southern Poland. In other words, it covered the entire planet without breaking a sweat. And it's a continuous plume covering the entire planet. And I'll show you a model of that in a second. Okay, so think about this number here, 1 million becquerels a square meter, 20 million particles in a study per liter of radioactive fallout, and 220 million atoms of Ottawa of iodine-129. These are catastrophic numbers. So this was France's model, and all the models basically agree exactly with this. So this is 15 days, and then 20 days is now, and 25 days, and it stops, I think, at 30 days. But obviously, just because the model stops, the plume keeps doing exactly that, see? Fukushima radiation still circling the globe. Levels are consistently rising and falling. Yeah, because it's an invisible plume. You can't perceive it or smell it or hear it or feel it or taste it or pick it up or throw rocks at it or anything else. Shocking how many people died in Fukushima. Cremated bodies of the workers from too much bananas. Such a high rate of cancer from potato chips and walking in sunshine and sleeping on airplanes. West Coast hit with 220 million atoms per liter. This is a study out of Ottawa, by the way, Canada. 20 million particles. 137 detected in Virginia rain. Plutonium escaped Fukushima reactors as gas. It's a colossal 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures inside. So it consumes steel and rebar and rocks and everything else. Can't be detected with Geiger counters. Terrible things are looming for the children. They must be evacuated, yet nothing is done. It's a criminal nation. Nuclear expert in Japan, plutonium is everywhere. It's everywhere. It's being redeposited and anticipated locations. Radioactive dust just wherever you go. It's running right into the Pacific. Black radioactive dust just wherever you go, this is incredible numbers we're actually talking about. Another one, over 200,000 becquerels a kilogram of radioactive cesium in the dust outside the prefecture. Evacuees from outside Fukushima, black dust everywhere. The government would not evacuate children because they have to certify it was safe to return, and they could not. It's an endless crisis. Black radioactive material being reported 100 kilometers south. Cesium-137 plume forecast for North America and Europe up to 24th of March, which is just 9 days later. So they got Chernobyl below and Fukushima above. And I think the Fukushima plume is based on 9 days or something. You can see Chernobyl. But Fukushima was infinitely worse than Chernobyl. Chernobyl was brutal. Fukushima nuclear plume covered most of North America. Covered it all. Water cannons can't spray the reactors because the radiation is too high. The helicopters can't go near the radiation or the reactors because the radiation is too high. Radiation is streaming into the atmosphere after number 4 pool boiled dry in the fire. Instead of saying the fuel pools melted down and caught fire, they say it boiled dry. Forecast map of the radioactive clouds shows threat to U.S. West Coast. And when you look at their models, their numbers put into models by the major shakers and movers, that's the plutonium dispersal. These are catastrophic numbers because this is only based on 20 days. And it's shocking at 20 days. Over 30,000 square kilometers in Japan blanketed by cesium and uranium and plutonium and americium and neptunium and strontium and everything else. Almost a million times more radioactive fallout in Ibaraki salt in 2009. So 30 million becquerels a square meter, basically. ABC calls radiation plume over Europe massive and then harmless, which is Australia major media, right? IAEA now claims that Hungary lab likely a source of the invisible plume covering the Europe. Well, it was Fukushima. It was a continuous plume. After 27 days, it covers the entire planet. So they report on the first instead of the last, right? Elementary school at Diachi, which is in Chiba, I think, 4 million becquerels a square meter, which is right by Tokyo. 4 million becquerels a square meter of cesium in the soil. Samples from school in Chiba, 20 kilometers from Tokyo. It's like Russian roulette, only 10% of the school lunches are test. And I've never seen a plume model of tritium. I don't know why. You think they would have thought about it and had that out there to screw us over. No, they dropped the ball on it. After all these years, all the plumes are unreal isotopes, not the fake ones like they're talking about, right? It's absurd how many models from different countries showed the entire planet covered in radiation. This one is the Norwegian Institute for Air Research in 19.5 days, 468 hours. And so the radiation pulses energy at the speed, like you get an atom, no matter where it's to, it could be 10 feet away from you, but it's still destroying your chromosomes, your DNA, and your cells. Your body has to repair everything every second. It's getting hit again. It can't keep up with it. And it repairs it by producing white blood cells, and they displace your red blood cells carrying oxygen and nutrition, and that leaves you with less oxygen and nutrition, meaning you become lethargic and lazy and unmotivated because you don't have any oxygen, right? You're not feeling healthy, which also means you're now more susceptible to pathogens and viruses that were normally harmless and innocuous and benign. Government survey shows Fukushima fallout is spread throughout Japan. Confirmed that Okinawa is 1,700 kilometers away, and South Korea is only 1,200 kilometers away. A shocking official made it mandatory to use Fukushima rice at school lunches. Shocking. It's an appropriate word, by the way. 70% of the children tested in Kanto, a region that includes Tokyo, have radioactive cesium in their urine. But don't worry, they're not going to release anything. It's all in the tanks, Dana. You see how ludicrous that statement is when you start looking at the documentation? Tokyo fog at 4,000 becquerels a kilogram is just gamma, just cesium. Really, like alphas and neutrons and betas and X-rays don't exist all of a sudden. How convenient, eh? Journalist finds Tokyo indoor dust contaminated with 1,700 becquerels a kilogram. Dust with Fukushima fallout is a source of human radiation exposure. 70% of the children tested are contaminated with radioactive cesium, all of them from outside the prefecture. No, the whole friggin' country, man. The whole country was contaminated. And then they said, frig it. Let's just pretend it's not happening. The whole planet, every model shows the whole planet almost covered in radiation. Now, the Xenon-133 in Seattle, Washington, and many other places, by the way, but in Washington was at 450,000 times background pre-meltdown. 450,000. It burns a hole through the lungs of the birds and mammals and animals and insects and children and sequesters in their bones where it mutates their stem cells. And it doesn't travel alone, see? Major problems for radiation testing for children. Government session reveals 400,000 times normal radioactive Xenon-133 in Chiba. The figure should be much higher. This is the whole northern hemisphere, because you had Washington with 450,000 times, Chiba by Tokyo with 400,000 times. This is the model, by the way, for North America of Xenon-133. The top model is just 20 days. So the model is not 100% accurate of how the fallout works, but it's close enough. It covers, once it does that, it can't stop but cover the whole planet. It's continuous. These are continuous plumes. So think about your car backfiring in the old days and you had this black puff of smoke coming up, right? Or even think of a nuclear weapon when you have a black puff of smoke come up. Well, this is a black puff of smoke that never stops coming up, and the plume covers the whole planet in just 20 or 30 days. It pulses energy at the speed of light every second. So think of an invisible snowstorm. After 20 or 30 days, the whole planet is a snowstorm, but you can't see it. Or maybe, no, you can see it. And the snow never melts, and it never stops snowing for the rest of your life for millions of years. Now flip it and say it's radiation and you can't see it, and it pulses energy every second for millions of years, and now you're starting to get somewhere. Think of a snowstorm that pulses energy almost at the speed of light every second. It wrecks every creature, everything, every single thing on the planet every second, pulsing it with full body X-rays, not to mention the gamma shines, the neutron bombardments, the beta rays. Newly released non-regulatory commission's emails reveal radioactive technetium-99 detected outside of Fukushima, 240 kilometers from the meltdown. One of the three principal radionuclides identified, besides all the other ones, right? Medical Journal article, 14,000 U.S. deaths after Fukushima fallout. That was that was a 3-week study where they seen 14,000, was updated 22,000 people dropped dead just randomly of heart attacks compared to any other statistical period in history. Highly radioactive glass rained on Tokyo. Fukushima nuclear fuel with 500 trillion becquerels a kilogram found. Significant consequences for the human health. Scientists, this changes the understanding of the disaster. This is a catastrophe. You're supposed to abandon Tokyo permanently. You can pretend it's not there all you want, but that's it. You're only pretending, and ultimately it catches up to you. 14,200 children per 100,000 live births across Japan, the entire country, need open heart surgery when they're born. Should be 1 or 2, right? At most. Officials admit deadly Fukushima meltdown cover-up. TEPCO president, we lied about the meltdowns. It was a cover-up. It's an unprecedented nuclear disaster. Wake up. Over 60 million Japanese irradiated by Fukushima. 50,000 square miles highly contaminated. So why eat the food from there? Why would you want to import food from scumbag Japan for? The government has decided, the nuclear industry decided to sacrifice them. And it's an actual crime we're talking about. More than 70% of the country is contaminated by huge numbers of radiation, and millions, many millions need to be evacuated. By the way, that's 2016, folks. 5 years later. Photographer in Japan is panicked. There's no way to escape. They were saying, oh, the Japanese are really stoic. Nobody panicked. Yellow rain recently reported in Tokyo. It was snowing, remember, that day in Japan. That night, rather. And Tokyo claimed it was pollen, but there was no plants pollinating. You're still in winter. There was snowing. Tokyo drinking, which you've seen after, same thing after Chernobyl. This was radioactive fallout. See? Tokyo drinking water unsafe for infants. The government was distributing bottled water. So that's permanent. You can't ever use the water. The water filtration systems now were completely compromised. And we know this because we know one spot, there's this one town, little small, it's not a big town, but they had, in 2019 or 18, they had 50,000 one-ton bags of sediment from the water reclamation filtration systems. They couldn't get rid of the sediment. The sediment was normally used for farming, right? And fertilizer was amazing. Now it couldn't be used because it's so radioactive. They wanted TEPCO to take it. TEPCO, finders keepers. Radioactive iodine, well, if you find radioactive iodines in the tap water, there's no way it's not loaded with curium isotopes, which is the biggest byproduct of radioactive fuel rods. Radioactive spinach 65 miles south of Fukushima. Japan bans radioactive green tea 40 miles southwest. That's the other side. And the legal limit then, in 2011, was 500 becquerels a kilogram, but they're only checking for cesium, and they're not checking for cesium. They gave the farmers Geiger counters and said if it's over 500 becquerels, don't ship it. Nudge, nudge. Just mix it with rice or stuff that's not 500 becquerels a kilogram and didn't ship it. So the next year, they dropped it to 100 becquerels a kilogram because you had an extra 865,000 extra cancers. Tokyo tea leaves 2,700 becquerels a kilogram of radioactive cesium picked by the elementary school children. Tea above legal limits 100 miles southwest, which is on the other side of Tokyo towards Nagasaki, Hiroshima. New documents show iodine-131 contamination was 350% of the highest amount reported, 54,000 becquerels a kilogram in spinach, 100 kilometers from Fukushima. From Fukushima. Forecast showed Tokyo under radiation threats Sunday, March the 20th. We now know that it was absurd numbers in Tokyo, like 29 million becquerels a square meter. A forecast map of radioactive clouds showed threat to the U.S. West Coast, and we'll show you lots of those examples. Western Tokyo was contaminated when the radioactive plume fell to the ground after number 1 core was exposed. Which I always found that to be a really interesting statement. We don't have a video of reactor 2 blowing up, but we do have reactor 1 blowing up and reactor 3, the Medusa, the mixed oxide fuel. 27,000 becquerels a kilogram cesium kindergarten near the west coast of Japan. Authorities hid the radioactive plume forecast to avoid evacuation. And we got 3 more to go. Or 300. High concentrations of radiation hit the U.S. and Canada. The plume was rich in cesium-137 close to the surface. This government simulation shows a radioactive plume of Krypton-85. Good old Superman stuff, eh? Deadly Superman fallout. When the MOX exploded. Because, we don't really include the krypton that often, do we? I apologize for that. I have no excuses. Government model shows Fukushima radioactive gas near Tokyo at 10 trillion or 10 billion times normal. There's no normal. That's permanent, never goes away. So good old elephant foot is coming after me, apparently. Fukushima residents fear losing their livelihood due to the Japanese government's irresponsible decision to discharge the nuclear contaminated water into the ocean. I just showed you it never stopped. Right? It's denial not to admit that the documentation I showed you is authentic. U.S. Air Force assisted in Fukushima disaster. This was Operation Tamagotchi. Resulted in approximately 20,000 fatalities, 6,000 injuries, 500,000 people displaced from their homes. And, of course, the official story is 140,000, right? Now, because they just kept hacking away at the numbers. The Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant also faces a crisis where the tsunami overwhelmed the reactors, cutting off power to water pumps and leading to a partial meltdown of 3 radioactive reactor cores. It was 4 and 8 fuel pools. And each fuel pool is at least 6 or 7 times the fuel in a reactor. They call it a partial meltdown? You sick bastards. Should Sweden, Iceland, Norway, and the EU have referendums before removing the Fukushima deadly radioactive nuclear food ban? Oop, excuse me. Woo! Okay. Japanese, South Korean lawmakers, civic groups gathered to oppose the tritium release. So they got the whole world protesting something that has actually been going on for 12 years instead of something that might be happening. They got everybody thinking it never happens, see? Switzerland lift the Fukushima disaster import curbs, and that's why we got a poll. Should Sweden, Iceland, Norway, the EU have a referendum? We got more than double the votes that we do people watching the show. No censorship at all. Okay, so let's get into the pictures, little video from today, just to get then I can tell you how this played out. So we changed the differential bushing support bracket, and now we got the box there. The box showed up, and we got the other shaft, because the U-joint was destroyed, and the shaft, or the bottom piece, the bottom of the screen was destroyed. I'll show you what that means.
You can see the difference.
So that piece barely moves, right?
Just a little bit. This one.
This is like almost comes right off.
Literally
right?
This one doesn't
pulling. It'll actually
go in.
It let go.
It just moves the lift right a little bit.
And the reason it's so bad because we're lugging around for all these years a massive amount of equipment, and it's caught up to me, right? And so you got the big trailer that weighs 1,500 pounds, and then we put another 1,500 pounds on it. And then we got the boat and all the equipment. We lugged that all over God's creations, all the potholes and everything else. And we literally tore the drive shaft apart. And we done a lot of damage. And so obviously that has to be replaced. So I replaced that tonight. I took it out for a test drive, and we didn't solve the problem. And so I was just sick to my guts again, because we done the bushing. That helped, right? We done that, and that helped, but we still have. And I recorded the sound, so I don't know how it's going to come out. I'll explain it to you as we get to it. So now I'm heading back up the hill today. And we're almost to the hill.
That didn't sound good.
And it's starting to show up already before I get on the hill.
I shouldn't be hearing it right there.
And what you're going to hear is like this little knocking, but that's the spinning of the shaft. So we damaged the transfer case, I'm guessing. I'm going to have to get into a garage tomorrow and get a diagnosis. Wait for it.
Gonna have to stop up right here. Stuff up right here. Just to be safe.
That's the shaft, folks. Fuck me. Come to a complete stop.
Just the shaft spinning.
Now I did notice the rear axle's universal joint is missing the caps. Let me see if I can show you what I mean here. Maybe this one here. Yeah, just hang on a second. I'll use this screen, hopefully. Oh, the other one, hang on. So what I'm thinking, we're going to have to go into a garage, but I'm going to have to deal... We're going to have to fix that anyway. But on the back, this is the front axle. So that's done. But that's the universal joint right here on that side. And you can see it up there. It's got blue tape on it. I happen to notice the back axle hasn't got the caps on it. But whatever I'm hearing, man, it's clanging again, right? But it's not as bad. We got most of the clanging's gone with the bushing for the differential. It's just like we've abused this thing for many, many years, and now it's come back and haunted us. And I'm totally frustrated, but I got myself under control again here just before we went live, because I desperately want to get out and do research, right? So tomorrow morning I'll jump underneath, I'll back it up and put it under, or drive it ahead and put it on the ramps. I'll get under the back of it and see how bad the universal joint is. I'll shoot down and get another universal joint. We'll watch some YouTube videos and then stick it in and see if that resolves it, because we're going to have to fix it. They're cheap, right? They're like $40 or something. And I think they might even be less than that. I know they have them locally, right? Because I went to pick one up before. Okay, and that's what they call them, universal joints, right? You can basically get them anywhere, that particular joint. And that's for the back axle, the big thick one. Listen, nobody is more heartbroken than I am, okay? And I can understand. But I mean, they were going to charge me almost $1,000 to do the bushing for the differential support bracket and the drive shaft itself, right? Because I was just going to try to replace the boot and the universal joint. That was almost $1,000 quote. And so, irregardless, this obviously had to be replaced. So we're still ahead of the ball game. So my big worry is we damaged, because we kept using it when it was damaged. And like you would expect, if you keep using something that's damaged, you damage other things. And I think that's what ended up happening. because we're not in a good place. We don't have a big support. They took down my other site, so I don't have that support anymore. So we're trying to just keep things moving to do the research where we can, and I'm glad we did. The documentation we gathered up was worth it. But we got to get back out there. We got to keep it up. And they want, in order to put the boat in the water and leave it in the water here, they want $100 a week. That's $400 a month to leave the boat in the water. I'm not comfortable leaving the boat in the water with all the attacks that I get against me from the industry, and I can't drive it there and bring it back every day till I resolve it. So the moral is, go change the universal joint. Go check it first, make sure it needs to be changed. And because the cap was missing, I was like, what the hell am I looking at? That cap's missing too? I can't believe I've never seen that before. It's just a lot of stress, I think, because we got a lot of things going wrong this summer and last summer, right? And the year kicked off with heart attacks, and I had to get 7 stents put in. And so I'm still recovering. I'm out there crawling around in the gravel on my back. I'm not complaining. I'm very grateful to be able to do it. And it's such a struggle, right? And I'm just one person. I'm doing the best I can. And so it's better if I do the things I can do, because we can't afford to pay the mechanics. They're just going to rob me, right? And when they see the Hummer, they always take another zero on it, right? Okay, so that's the plan tomorrow. Is if that rear universal joint, I'll check the front one too on the rear shaft. If they're in bad shape, they're going to have to be replaced anyway. I'll replace them. And get that done by noon. And then see if I can get a mechanic to do a diagnosis if it's still not resolved. Right, rather than say go ahead and fix it, because it could be a $5,000 bill, right? So get a diagnosis, pay for that, and then if I can go get the parts, I'll go get the parts, and if I can do it myself, I'll do it myself. If not, I'll get the parts and get the mechanic to do it, right? But we're at the, I'm literally tortured at this stage, and we're burning constant money, and we just can't keep it up, right? I'm just worn. I'm ran into the ground mentally too. And now I got elephant foot is going to be coming after me and attacking me. the terrorist. Yeah. So Kishida Mashada, he gave up, eh? He wept for the last week or something, and then, I'm going to get elephant foot to beat you up. That's his twin brother, the shoe bomber. He's from Great Britain. You know what kind of piece of shit he's going to be? Pro-nuclear from Great Britain. Okay. I'm going to laugh about it because it's such a painful day for me. It's been such a painful day to try to resolve. And I put the starting motor, I went up to pick up the starting motor, and he said there was nothing wrong with the starting motor, so then he charged me $45. He acid washed it and cleaned up all the contacts and blah, 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 and charged me $45, which is really good. And I got no issues with that, right? He took it apart, and he said, look, that was working fine. And so tomorrow, the solenoid didn't show up today. It was supposed to show up today, so it'll be here tomorrow. So before I touch that one, I'm going to go after the truck, obviously. But when you got problems piling up on you, you still got to deal with them. You still got to resolve them. Because if you can fix it, then that's one less nightmare, right? That takes a lot of pressure off your shoulders. But at the same time, we'll check the universal joints on the rear axle. If they need to be replaced, which I'm assuming one does for sure, I'll replace it. Then go get a diagnosis. That'll say it cost me $100 for an hour to diagnose it. And then work out, if it's something serious, then hit the scrap yards. Like if it's a transfer case, the problem is it's a Hummer, so you can't just go throwing anything in there, right? And we're in out on an island in the middle of nowhere, and there's not a lot of options. So I might have to import one if that's what it turns out to be. But we got no options. We can't get. I'm just burnt out from all of the stress, and the only option now is just to deal with it, right? And so I'll deal with it. I'm hoping by Monday I'll have an answer or a solution, because we got to, see? As if Elephant Foot doesn't get me and beat me up or something. Anyway, we're going to call it quits. Yeah, well. Let's close the poll down, I suppose. So we got a strange poll tonight. We only got 32 votes, but we got 37 likes. And so it's always the opposite. It's never more likes than votes, ever. Only when there's heavy censorship. It's a very rare thing. And you can tell clearly that I'm censored heavily tonight. So, should Sweden, Iceland, Norway, and the EU have referendums before removing Fukushima's deadly radioactive nuclear food ban? Well, like my opinion is yes. Yeah, good night, everybody. Folks, for everybody, have a great night, great day tomorrow. We'll see everybody on Sunday, unless there's earthquakes and everything else. And I wanted to come out and address that ridiculous phone call, that desperate phone call from Tokyo's little puppet last night. And make sure they realize that I'm not scared of Elephant Foot, okay? Or Elephant Man, I should call him. What a horrible person he turned out to be. And to remind people, that I got a big and important operation that I'm trying to run. And the world needs to make a decision, you know? If you go under my video, all the way to the bottom of the description, you'll see two different ways, directly to me. Both ways are directly to me to donate to me. And the one at my site, for instance, you see, let it load up for a second. When you see that picture, right below that picture is the donate button. All you do is click on that, and literally almost any credit card should work on it. PayPal or Google cards, Apple cards. You go and buy a $30 Apple card, you should be able to donate on that button. It's a big organization that we're using. I don't have anything to do with that, right? That all goes through an official banking system. And we've been doing it for a decade, and there's never been an issue. And if they didn't take my site down, we could have resolved all this. We would have just had a fundraiser, raised the money, put it in the shop, whatever it was, had a fundraiser, paid for it, right? Instead, I'm not friggin' healthy, and I'm out there crawling around on my back, beating the shit out of myself to save a few $100 constantly. You really think that's not going to catch up to me? Is it fair that it's so hard to do these shows every fucking night, and it's so desperate to get out there and do the research, and we can't even. And we were going out for the first couple of 3 weeks with a broken engine on the ocean, on the Atlantic Ocean, in desperation to get the documentation of whether the migratories showed up or not, and how the species that were residential were faring, how the chicklets and hatchlings and everything else. And it was madness. The alarms would go off every time you hit 3,000 RPM. It was madness. And lots of people making fun of me and blah, blah, blah. But we got the documentation, and we took a risk every fucking time doing it. There was no fun. There's never any fun, certainly, but it's like, you know what I mean? It's not fair that I have to have so much stress on top of everything else that I'm doing. It's unconscionable, really. And so, because they do that to me, I hate them, the nuclear industry, so much more. So they're just guaranteeing I'll never go away. That's all they're going to do, right? The industry's not going to drive me away by sending one of the local terrorists after me, or by denying me the ability to do the work. They're just going to piss me off, and they're going to help me resolve my commitment to work 10 times harder. And that's what we're seeing. And just because you're censoring the numbers don't mean the people are not watching. And I apologize for not getting everything right, not being able to do everything, and struggling the entire time, planet Earth. I apologize, but I won't give up. I won't be stopping, and we will succeed against all the odds on top of that. We are still going strong, and we are never going away because of what they've done to this planet and myself. I'm never going away. I'll be here. You can put out 1,000 elephant foots to attack me. I'll challenge every one of them with the documentation, move on to the next one. I'm never going away. I will haunt this industry till the day I die, and I'm really good at it too. So have a great night. We'll see you soon enough. Hugs for everybody. Yeah, Stinkfoot, there you go. Good job, Richard. Elephant foot is too kind. Stinkfoot is more appropriate. Stinkfoot it is. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up if you make it this far. We'll see everybody Sunday. Take care, folks.
Feuer, Trunken, himmlische dein Heiligtum, deine Zauber